Hey guys, tonight we're peeling back the layers of Earth and time, not through a dusty old lecture, but through your own footsteps into the wild, whispering hills of Croatia. You'll walk alongside creatures who look like you but aren't quite you, and peer into fires lit over 100,000 years ago. You'll hear bones speak and stones remember, and honestly, you probably won't survive this, because once you've heard what these Neanderthals were really up to, your entire view of prehistoric might just disintegrate. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Drop a comment with your location and what time it is where you're watching this. Let's see how far back in time we're traveling tonight. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You stand at the edge of Hunjakovo Hill, just outside the quiet Croatian town of Krapina. Wind tugs gently at your sleeves, curling around the olive-colored stones embedded in the hillside. The grass feels ancient here, like it's been listening longer than any of us have been speaking. Beneath your feet lie the oldest known secrets of a people long forgotten by classrooms and timelines. Krapina's Neanderthals, not the brutish caveman cartoons and Halloween masks taught you to imagine, but a world of ritual, complexity, and startling echoes of yourself. A museum stands nearby, sleek and modern, but tonight you don't go in, you go under. You climb the slope as twilight sinks into your bones, imagining it not as a tourist, but as a witness. The wind carries the faint smell of soil and moss, and maybe, just maybe, a trace of wood smoke from a fire that burned here 120,000 years ago. They lived here, you realize. Not just survived, lived. Hunted in the dense forests, nursed the sick, buried their dead. And that last one burial is where things start to unravel. You crouch low over a shallow depression in the ground where archaeologists found over 800 Neanderthal fossil fragments representing nearly 80 individuals. That's not a typo, 80. All discovered between 1899 and 1905 by Dragut and Gorjanovic. Kramberger, a name that, honestly, deserves way more cool points than your high school textbook ever gave him. These bones weren't just scattered like a predator's leftovers. They showed patterns, arrangement, clustering, even care. Skulls next to femurs, younger individuals near older ones. Some believe it was intentional, a graveyard, a sign of mourning. Others argue it was more chaotic debris from flash floods or predator activity. Historians still argue whether the Krapina Neanderthals practiced intentional burial or if the bones ended up this way by natural processes. But if you tilt your head just right, you feel a presence, a hush in the wind that doesn't feel accidental. You picture them now, seated around a fire, eyes flickering in the flame, watching the sun drop over the same ridge you now stand on. Were they saying goodbye to someone? Was there a ritual, a prayer, a final meal, and then jewelry? Wait, what? Yep, this is where it gets wild. Among the remains at Krapina were 8 eagle talons, each with cut marks and wear patterns that some scientists believe were strung together as ornaments. You're looking at what might be the oldest known jewelry in the world, worn not by Homo sapiens but by Neanderthals. Let that sit for a second while your inner caveman does a fashion twirl. The talons are sleek, curved, sharp. You imagine them glinting in the firelight, strung along sinew, clacking softly with every movement. Not practical, not edible, not for hunting, just a symbolic. And here's the kicker: this happened long before Homo sapiens arrived in the region, which means Neanderthals didn't borrow this behavior from us. If anything, we may have learned it from them. You laugh quietly. Remember that time in school when someone called a Neanderthal a dummy? Turns out they may have been accessorizing. Before your ancestors even had pants. The air cools as the stars begin to peer through the velvet sky. You sit for a moment, letting the idea settle that Neanderthals may have expressed identity, grief, and artistry without a single word written down. A rustle behind you stirs the leaves. A badger maybe, or just the echo of a time when this hill wasn't a quiet overlook, but a thriving encampment of fire, tools, chatter, and bone. You rise slowly, dusting off your hands, and glance toward the shadows where the dig once took place. The earth doesn't speak out loud, but it leaves clues. You just have to know how to listen. The bones whisper still, and they are far from done. You descend the hill with the night full around you, your fingers trailing against the cool limestone wall as you follow a narrow path leading toward the site's deeper secrets. The kind of secrets that textbooks don't make room for. The kind that rattle the bones of everything you thought you understood about primitive. You reach a hollow, a bowl-shaped dip where the forest folds inward like cupped hands, and, in the middle, a fire pit reconstructed. Sure, but it crackles in your imagination, like it never left. This is where the talons were found. Not eagle feathers, talons, razor-edged, curved, intimidating. You crouch beside a replica of one, running your thumb across its blunt edge. The original bore scrape marks delicate, intentional grooves near the base, not made by nature, made by a hand. Maybe even by you if time bent just a little more generously. Scholars believe these 8 eagle talons, discovered back in 1899, were shaped and strung into a pendant necklace. That's not decoration by accident. That's not survival instinct. That's something else entirely. Call it identity. Call it status. Or maybe even a hint of spiritual thinking. You grin, imagining a Neanderthal stepping out of his cave with his talon drip, ready to impress the tribe. No offense to your high school class photos, but this guy probably had more flair. And yet, the big question remains, why talons? Some researchers argue they symbolized power, dominance, or connection to the sky. Others whisper of shamans and ritual leaders. One theory even ties the eagle to a sort of proto-religious reverence. After all, how many ancient cultures would later hold birds sacred? But of course, not everyone agrees. Paleontologists still debate whether the talons were true symbols or simply cool-looking, a kind of prehistoric why not accessory. Maybe they had no deep meaning. Maybe they were the crux of the Paleolithic. The arguments don't end there. You shift toward another exhibit this time, a series of skulls showing signs of injuries, healed fractures, clean breaks that mended over time. You stare at the jagged crack running over one cranium and feel your own scalp tingle. Someone survived that. And not just survived, they were likely cared for afterward. Now that's something. In a world of wolves, winter, and constant scarcity, a broken limb would usually mean a death sentence. But not here. The bones at Krapina suggest community, compassion, maybe even early medicine. Imagine it someone dragging a wounded friend back to camp, grinding medicinal herbs from the plants you smell even now. In the forest breeze, maybe they set bones, using branches or created poultices from wild garlic and moss. Some of this may be guesswork, but the healed fractures aren't. Again, though some experts push back. Could these injuries have happened post-mortem? Was it just the weathering of time? The scientific jury is still out, but your gut tells you otherwise. You feel the warmth in these stories, the fingerprints of empathy. You lean against a tree, letting the branches sway above your head like ancient ceiling beams, and chuckle softly. Remember when people said Neanderthals lacked language? Yeah. About that, recent studies of the Krapina remains and related sites show that Neanderthals likely had the vocal structures to produce complex sounds. Maybe not Shakespeare, but certainly not silence. You imagine them calling across a river, singing around fires, or whispering at a burial site. The forest around you seems to pulse with echoes of those voices, low, rhythmic, woven into the rustle of leaves and bird calls. Of course, there's no Rosetta Stone of Neanderthal speech yet, but the presence of a bone called the hyoid in their fossil record, virtually identical to yours, has researchers leaning more and more toward the idea that they did speak, maybe even sing. The path leads you further, where another shadowed display reveals cut marks on long bones, deep, clean incisions. A chill slides down your spine. Some interpret these marks as signs of cannibalism. You step back involuntarily, the firelight in your mind flickering. Krapina may hold one of the oldest debates in anthropology. Did Neanderthals consume their own? Some argue it was ritualistic. Others insist it was starvation, pure and simple. A few even whisper about funerary rites, eating as a form of honoring, not desecration. Yeah, dark stuff. And not everyone buys it. The marks could be animal scavenging, or even damage from natural erosion. But if it was cannibalism, what does that mean for our ancestors? That survival trumped taboo, that ritual was more flexible than we can stomach today. You stand still for a long moment, the The forest is silent, almost holding its breath. You think about the layers of history beneath your feet. Some of them kind, some of them cruel, all of them human. The wind picks up again, and you hear it not literally, but in the way the trees bend, in the way the fire seems to crackle even in your thoughts we were here. The Neanderthals of Krapina weren't just dumb brutes or mythic shadows. They were real, they were complex, and maybe, in some deeply inconvenient ways, they were us. You reach the bottom of the path and turn back to look at the ridge. You imagine it again, eagle talons gleaming, fires glowing, voices rising in unknown songs. Maybe they didn't vanish. Maybe they just became us. The night has folded itself around you like a quiet blanket. Each step you took through the stone shadows of Krapina still echoing softly in your mind. You sit now perhaps on your bed, a couch, or nestled somewhere cozy, and everything you've imagined, every flicker of ancient firelight, every footprint pressed into the long-forgotten soil, still lingers like embers glowing in your chest. You think of the talons again, their curves not just fierce but beautiful, not just survival tools but maybe, just maybe, symbols of identity. You think of broken bones mending under the care of a tender hand, of voices rising in languages we'll never understand but can somehow still feel. You smile at the idea of a Neanderthal joking, dancing, maybe even complaining about the cold, just like you do. Maybe they sat in circles and told stories too, under stars that haven't changed, beneath the hush of wind that still moves through these same forests. Even with all our science, all our scanning and DNA and radiocarbon tools, we still don't fully know them. And maybe that's the best part. That quiet space between fact and wonder is where stories live. And tonight, you've wandered right into that space. You've touched the edges of mystery, breathed in the dust of ancient lives, and just for a little while walked beside the forgotten ones. Now let it all drift, like smoke from an old fire rising into the stars. Let your breath slow. Let your body rest. You've traveled far tonight, across time, across questions. There's no need to answer them all. Not now. Close your eyes. You're safe here. Let the silence of the forest wrap around you and sleep.